You've probably felt it before. That strange disappointment that creeps in after you get the thing you thought you wanted. You hit the goal, check the box, cross the finish line, and then, almost immediately, you're looking for the next thing. That feeling isn't a glitch in the system. It is the system. In this video, we're going to explore why chasing goals, at least the way we've been taught to, is not just ineffective, it's a fool's errand. You'll see why the problem isn't that your goals are too big or too small, it's that they're pointed in the wrong direction altogether. Because what if success isn't a destination, but a direction of travel? What if the real question isn't, what do I want? But, who am I becoming? Inspired by thinkers like Hunter S. Thompson, Alan Watts, and Viktor Frankl, we'll break down why the obsession with goal setting keeps us lost, and conforming your life around who you already are is the only kind of success that actually feels like it. This is not a video about giving up on your dreams. This is about choosing better dreams. In 1958, a 22-year-old man wrote to his friend, Hunter S. Thompson, asking for advice on what to do with his life. Thompson, not yet the drug-fueled icon he'd become, responded with something most advice givers would never say. He responded, quote, "You ask advice. Ah, what a very human and very dangerous thing to do. For to give advice to a man who asks what to do with his life implies something very close to egomania. To presume to point a man to the right and ultimate goal, to point with a trembling finger in the right direction, is something only a fool would take upon himself. Yet despite this, what followed was one of the most lucid and unsettling essays ever written on ambition. Thompson warned that if we make decisions based only on what we think we want, we may spend our whole lives climbing a ladder, only to find it's leaning against the wrong wall. He said, quote, "When you were young, let us say that you wanted to be a fireman. I feel reasonably safe in saying that you no longer want to be a fireman. Why? Because your perspective has changed. It's not the fireman who has changed, but you. That's the key. Our wants change. Who we are changes. And if we pick a life direction too early, based on some tidy goal, some clear path laid out in front of us, we risk waking up one day in a life that doesn't fit. Not because the world betrayed us, but because we betrayed ourselves, trying to become someone we no longer are." According to Thompson, quote, "To put our faith in tangible goals would seem to be, at best, unwise. So we do not strive to be firemen, we do not strive to be bankers, nor policemen, nor doctors. We strive to be ourselves, but don't misunderstand me. I don't mean that we can't be firemen, bankers, or doctors, but that we must make the goal conform to the individual, rather than make the individual conform to the goal." He went on to summarize his underlying message by saying, quote, "Let's assume that you think you have a choice of 8 paths to follow, all predefined paths, of course. And let's assume that you can't see any real purpose in any of the 8. Then, and here is the essence of all I've said, you must find a 9th path." Thompson believed that if none of the options life presents feel right, you shouldn't pick the best one. You should find a different one altogether. And it's not chosen once, it's rediscovered constantly in the tension between who you are now and who you're becoming. Here's what no one tells you about chasing goals. The clearer the goal, the easier it is to lose yourself in it. Because the moment you define a fixed outcome, I want to make $1 million, I want to become a filmmaker, I want to be admired, you begin subtly reshaping your life to serve that outcome. You make choices not based on what feels meaningful now, but on what you think will get you there. You start dressing for the part, speaking for the part, thinking for the part. And without realizing it, you're living as an actor auditioning for a future self. That's the real danger. You wake up one day with a resume, a lifestyle, even a personality that looks like success, but none of it feels like you. And because the goal is always in the future, you never really arrive. The goal becomes a mirage, and the further you walk toward it, the more parched you become. That's why people burn out after getting what they want. Not because they aim too high, but because they were aiming at the wrong thing entirely. They built a life to serve a destination, not to honor a self. Thompson understood this. That's why he urged his friend not to conform to a goal, no matter how noble, impressive, or well-meaning it seemed. Because when you set a goal, the pressure is to become the kind of person who reaches it, But when you follow what's true for you, the pressure disappears because you're not performing anymore. You're living. Hunter S. Thompson didn't just write about finding a ninth path. He built his entire career by doing exactly that. After a troubled youth, where he was expelled from high school and later joined the Air Force, Thompson drifted between jobs. He worked as a copy boy at Time magazine, then as a journalist in Puerto Rico, and later traveled Latin America as a freelance correspondent. None of it was part of a clear plan, but each move was shaped by a simple question: what feels true to me right now? His first major breakthrough came in 1965 when he spent a year writing with the Hells Angels, producing a raw first-person account that was unlike anything else in American journalism. It wasn't a stunt. It was exactly the kind of story Thompson needed to write, an unfiltered look at the darker currents of American life, from the inside. The book made his name, but instead of riding that success into a safe career path, he went further off script. He began writing stories in which he abandoned objectivity entirely, placing himself at the center. The result was gonzo journalism, a new form of writing that fused reporting, satire, autobiography, and hallucination. It wasn't professional, it wasn't polished, but it was unmistakably his. In Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, he turned a drug-fueled road trip into a portrait of American disillusionment. In his political writing, he shredded conventions with brutal honesty and manic clarity. His work was unpredictable, polarizing, and often self-destructive, but it was never calculated. He didn't follow the path of the respectable writer, or the profitable one, or even the sustainable one. He followed the path that made sense to him, moment to moment, story to story. Of course, Thompson's story isn't a clean motivational arc. He drank heavily, he used drugs constantly, and in 2005, at age 67, he died by suicide. To some, that discredits everything, but that's a misunderstanding of what he was after. Thompson wasn't chasing happiness. He wasn't optimizing for health, or legacy, or even longevity. He was pursuing freedom, not the kind printed on bumper stickers. The real kind, to write what he wanted, think what he wanted, live how he wanted, without asking permission. That freedom came with a price, and he paid it. That doesn't make him a hero, it makes him honest. He never pretended the path he chose was safe or virtuous or wise. But it was his. And if nothing else, he proved that you can reject every available option, and still carve out something entirely your own. It's not always easy to tell what you really want. Not because it's hidden, but because so much noise has gathered around it. Expectations, comparisons, shoulds. Over time, they stack up, until it's hard to distinguish your own voice from the echo. But every now and then, when things are quiet enough, you catch a glimpse, a flicker of feeling when you're walking alone. A sudden pull towards something small and hard to explain. Maybe you've felt it in certain places, or with certain people, or in the middle of doing something that didn't make much sense, but somehow felt more true than anything else. That's not just mood, that's direction. The trouble is, it doesn't arrive as a clear sentence. It shows up more like weather, subtle, shifting, impossible to grasp. But it's there. And the more you notice it, the more you begin to remember that you have always known in some quiet way what truly draws you, not what you're supposed to want, not what will look good on paper, but what actually calls to you, even if no one's watching, even if it doesn't lead anywhere obvious. That is the beginning of the ninth path. Not a goal you chase, but a thread you follow gently. The first step on the ninth path is to start identifying the obstacles, both external and internal, that are preventing you from moving toward what truly calls to you. But first, if you're finding this video to be true, and if it's turning any lights on for you, please consider hitting the subscribe button to help spread this message. If you've ever caught that glimmer, that faint sense of what draws you, and then watched it fade, you're not alone. Most people don't ignore what's true because they're lazy or blind. They ignore it because it feels impossible. Sometimes it's the weight of the world around you, the job that pays too well to leave, the family that expects a certain version of you, the social gravity that pulls you toward what's normal, explainable, acceptable. Other times, it's something quieter, a voice inside that says, "Who am I to want this?" It's too late. If I try and fail, what then? These obstacles are subtle but powerful because they don't scream, they whisper. They tell you it's safer not to reach, that it's noble to be practical, that the life you want is indulgent or irresponsible or naive. And so we bargain with ourselves. We silence the pull, we tuck it away. Until one day, we can't remember what it felt like at all. But here's the truth. That pull never needed to be loud. It only needed to be trusted. And the things that block us, the circumstances, the fear, the doubt, they are not fixed, they're fog, and fog lifts. When the fog lifts, it doesn't feel dramatic. It feels clear. Not like something new has appeared, but like something obvious has returned. A shape you couldn't quite make out is suddenly there. A quiet knowing you'd half forgotten becomes steady again. And from that clarity, something shifts. You start to notice which parts of your life feel heavy, and which parts feel light. You start moving toward the light things, not because they promise anything, but because they make sense to you in some quiet, cellular way. Maybe it begins with a shift so small you barely register it. You stop lying in one particular conversation. You say no to something you always said yes to. You go for a walk with no destination. You follow a thread of curiosity, just to see where it leads. And then something unexpected happens. The world starts to respond. You meet someone new, someone you didn't even realize you needed to meet. You stumble into work that feels less like work and more like alignment. You find yourself in rooms you never would have entered, saying things you never thought you were allowed to say. Not every day is radiant. Some days still feel lost, but they're lost in motion. And that's the difference. You're no longer waiting for the life you want to begin. You're living inside it, imperfectly, but honestly. And it doesn't look like a straight line. It doesn't look like a plan, but somehow it feels like home. But what happens when that sense of direction is taken from you? When the thing that calls to you becomes unreachable, or the road forward disappears completely? Perhaps no one can answer this question better than Viktor Frankl. His book, Man's Search for Meaning, is often misunderstood, treated like a kind of spiritual shortcut, a way to simply discover your life's purpose and feel better in hard times. But that's not what Frankl offers. He doesn't tell us what the meaning of life is. He doesn't even suggest there is one singular meaning. What he describes is far more radical. Frankl was a prisoner in Auschwitz. Everything had been stripped from him: his family, his work, his future, his freedom. But in that devastation, he noticed something. Certain men still lived, not just in body, but in spirit. And what kept them alive wasn't some philosophical belief. It was contact with humor, with memory, with love. Frankl jokes with other prisoners, even in the face of death. He clings to the image of his wife's face, not knowing she is already gone. These moments aren't answers, they're openings. Tiny cracks in the ceiling of a collapsed world, just wide enough to let a little light through. That's what Frankl teaches, not how to decode the cosmos, but how to stay in touch with meaning even when it's nowhere to be found, and how to choose it, moment by moment, in small, personal ways. We want meaning to be a lighthouse, but sometimes it's just a single star, faint and distant, but enough to steer by, enough to remind us we're still alive, and still ourselves. The truth is, no matter how difficult your life becomes, if you are oriented toward what really calls to you, those cracks in the ceiling can always be found. Light is always still creeping in, from somewhere. Frankl reveals that finding meaning is not about crawling around in the dark for something to hold on to. It is about finding what is blocking your view. In the modern world, it can seem, at least on the surface, like things are going fine, or at least that they should be. But one could argue that today we are up against more obstructions to a clear look at the stars, a clear view of what is truly meaningful than we can even keep track of. We are surrounded by things designed to block our view, a slow drip of noise and novelty that keeps us just stimulated enough to forget what it feels like to feel deeply. You know the list: endless scrolling, cheap dopamine, passive entertainment, not bad in themselves, but dangerous in accumulation. Because they create a kind of emotional static that makes it almost impossible to hear what's underneath. You finish an episode, you check your phone, you eat something, you do it again, and you think you're relaxing. But what you're really doing is postponing your own life. It's not that these things are evil, it's that they're too easy, and easy things have a way of crowding out the essential ones, the ones that take time and space and quiet. When meaning gets blocked, we don't feel empty, at least not at first. Instead, we feel busy. We start to feel overwhelmed by life. We start getting distracted, and slowly we start losing interest. Life gets grayer and grayer, and we turn to our most immediate tools: scrolling, watching, binging. And if you follow the advice most people will give you, we start plotting and planning too. How we are going to fix ourselves, how we're going to change who and what we are, so as to fit into this life that is getting stranger and stranger by the minute. But as you can probably see by now, this is a mistake. The grayness of your life is not due to the fact that you aren't good enough for it. It is due to the fact that you've been led astray from what actually inspires you, mired in a whirlwind of responsibilities you didn't ask for, goals you don't actually want to reach, and devices that are always there to keep your mind from realizing you're not where you belong. Does this mean living in the modern world means being forced into a trap, where we have no choice but to succumb to the rules and demands of a world that has been built around goals and goal-oriented thinking? It might seem like it, but there are those who disagree. One highly influential example is the philosopher Alan Watts. Watts saw that we've been trained to treat our lives like a delayed reward system. First the grind, then the vacation. First the job, then the retirement. First the achievement, then the satisfaction. But when does that shift actually happen? For most people, never. Because the habit of rushing toward the end becomes the habit of missing everything. What Watts offers is radical, but simple. There's nothing to reach. There's only something to experience. Not later, not someday, but now. Though it is often misinterpreted, this does not mean that you shouldn't have ambition. You should. In fact, if you finally rediscovered the parts of life that you find most inspiring, you'll naturally be full of energy and desire. It just won't be the desire to prove anything to other people, nor will it be the desire to embark on some long and aggravating climb toward an imagined future, to an imagined new version of yourself that you'll become once you get there. As a wise songwriter by the name of John Foreman once put it, "Where can you run to escape from yourself? No matter where you go, no matter what accolades you acquire, no matter how much alleged success you have in the eyes of the world, you will always be you, having your experience in your body, with your mind and your feelings, your contact with the world, as it is all around you. You might as well make it about the experiences you want to have while you are still alive. After all, it's the only life you'll ever get to live through." So, whatever shape your life ultimately takes, be wary of evaluating it based on your tangible accomplishments, or how much you have attracted the envy and admiration of your peers. There is nothing nourishing, nothing truly satisfying, and nothing worthwhile about being loved for someone you are not. Remember, you too are a spectator in that game, watching your career play out in front of you as a performance, with your likeness as the central protagonist. But while still, no matter what, being you in the shadows. Deep down, you don't really want to achieve anything. What you want is freedom. To throw yourself into the great wide open, to find all your repressed internal contradictions aligned, to find love and acceptance for every part of who and what you really are. To move through this world without any limits and without any fear of anyone or anything. And here is the best part. Though it may not always show it, behind the veil, the world wants you too. Thanks for watching. If you found this video useful, please consider subscribing. We have lots more to discuss. Until then, take care. We'll see you next time.